If you watch the footage frame by frame, the last thing you see isn't the child. It's the light itself changing its mind. 3 people stood 10 feet away. 2 were talking. 1 was filming a sparrow on a fence. A 4th swore they were holding Emma's hand. All of them were right. That's how you vanish in plain sight, by asking the day to hold 2 truths at once and counting on the rest of us to pick the prettier one. My name's Daniel North, 51, ex-crime reporter who learned to fix lawnmowers when the news started fixing me. I don't believe in miracles, but I do believe in what happens to air when a lie gets tired. The Harrison case taught me both. The file came to me the way old Payne does, folded, mislabeled, and slipped under my door by a neighbor who knows too much about who I used to be. Solved, the sticky note said, but not explained. I made coffee that could wake a verdict and opened the first page. Emma Harrison, age 3. Vanished at a neighborhood picnic Tuesday, 2:14 p.m. Found no. That's not the word accounted for 42 years later, when a box of ordinary junk told a story louder than a confession. Case closed, said the state. Try me, said the street, where she disappeared. You can tell a lot about a place by what it keeps out of habit. Hawthorn Drive kept flags, plastic tricycles, and the scent of charcoal lighter. It also kept a sound that didn't belong, a soft, sustained shimmer, like wind chimes behind glass. I heard it as soon as I parked at the curb and killed the engine. The neighborhood was the kind you remember, even if you've never been. Porches with confidence, dogs with opinions, a mailbox that still believed in letters. At the corner stood the oak where the footage was taken, 1979 camcorder. New back then, the picture browned at the edges as if memory had been toasted too long. I'm not above superstition, but I like my ghosts with paperwork. I had both. The paperwork said Emma wore red shorts, a white shirt with a blue stripe, and jelly sandals that wanted dirt to be a friend. The ghost was quieter, an angle in the shade that didn't follow the sun. I stepped into it and felt the temperature drop, the way it does in a church when someone arrives who needs more from the room than the room is built to give. The tape digitized now, stabilized by a librarian with patience, showed a long table, paper plates, adults miscounting the number of children by exactly 1. A boy ran past the lens with a sparkler that wasn't lit and yelled, "Look!" at a bird that didn't ask for the responsibility. In the left third of the frame, just before a father blocks the view with his laugh, a small bright shape moves toward the tree line. That's Emma, the caption says. But the math refuses to behave. If that's Emma, who is the child weaving back toward the cooler at the same moment from the opposite direction? If it's a trick of parallax, it's the kind of trick that understands grief better than optics. I found Mary Ellen Halper at a kitchen table, still loyal to Formica. She was the neighbor with the camcorder. Now 80, her voice sounded smooth by the years. She poured sweet tea like a woman who has hosted both storms and holidays and learned they tip the same. I don't watch the tape anymore, she said. It watches me. What do you remember that the tape does not? I asked. That she was happy, Mary Ellen said, quicker than a cough. And that the light went thin, just for a breath. Not dark thin, like the day exhaled and forgot to breathe back in. She pointed to the screen door. Stand there around 2. You'll hear it. Hear what? The hum, she said. It's not a sound. It's the shape of a sound that already happened. I stood at the screen door at 1:57, like a man who believes in appointment television. Hawthorn summers do a trick around then. The cicadas vote, the asphalt gives up an argument with the sun, and the shadows lose their confidence. The hum came in sideways, not to my ear first, but to the bones under my right eye. It tasted metallic and old, like a coin pressed into a palm that didn't ask. I've been to sites with residual nonsense, battlefields with echoing cannon that never learned the word reenactment, stairwells where shoes keep busy in houses that forgot how to invite. This was different, more surgical. as if the world drew a contour line around 3 feet of air and said, "This is where 2 paths touch without shaking hands." What did the detectives think? I asked. They measured everything but the apology, she said. They were good men. But they wanted who, not how. We got who, years later. We never got how. Who? You can read that in the papers, she said, which is Southern, for we all have to get up tomorrow. The man across the river with the gray van and the new name. The box in his garage with more names than tools. The fibers that remembered Emma better than we deserved. They solved it. Good for them. But the street never stopped asking the real question. What's the real question? How did he do it with all of us watching, she said. And what did the light owe him to help? I took my recorder out. Don't laugh. It's analog, and set it on the table like an old friend invited to supper. I'm going to ask you to show me the frame again, I said. But this time we'll watch the shadows instead of the people. We watched. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 47 seconds, a father's body crosses the lens and becomes a wall. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 48 seconds, the white glint Emma, or not, moves left. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 49 seconds, a paper plate flutters and a piece of aluminum foil flares. People see flare and think fire. Photographers see it and think angle. I saw it and thought debt. A debt the day paid all at once, invisibility, in exchange for something I couldn't name yet. Do you hear that? Mary Ellen whispered. The hum? No, the laughter. It gets off. She was right. The audio warbled as if the tape were suddenly unsure about what exactly it was recording. A second track led through a faint, distant version of the same scene, half a beat out of time. I drove the loop 3 more times that afternoon. Corner, oak, curb, mailbox, with a dent from a 1991 snow shovel. Each pass sharpened what I already knew and drowned what I wanted to guess. That night, I lay on a motel bed whose comforter belonged to 3 administrations ago and stared at the ceiling until this light there did the thing light does in cheap rooms. It flickered between service and complaint. Around 2 a.m., I wrote down the rule I would test the next day. If a place can keep a shadow the way a person keeps a secret, then a shadow can keep a place. Morning gave me Mr. Alvarez, who had mowed the same 3 lawns since Jesus had a paper route. He'd been 20 when Emma vanished, and the noise that made him was still in his face. They tell you it's solved, he said, and that helps you sleep a different way, but not better. He pointed with the mower handle toward the oak. The police chalked lines on the grass back then. Me too. My lines were wider. What do you mean? I mow with a pattern, he said. You do that long enough. You learn which grass forgives the blade and which remembers it. The square by the cooler right there never grew back the same. Like an extra pair of feet wore it out that day. Small feet, fast, then gone. Emma's? He looked at me like a man who hates to be unkind. I said small. There's a trick I use when a place is talking, and I don't want to scare it off. I take something and give it weight it doesn't deserve. This time it was a red plastic cup from the picnic box someone had saved as a relic without admitting it. I set it at the corner of the table in the yard where the foil had flared. The cup caught a sliver of sun and threw it to the grass, a red coin for a dog to chase. Nothing moved. But the hum took a half step closer. You'll ask me what I think now, after the man across the river with the gray van confessed enough to make lawyers happy. After the DNA did its quiet heroics, and the affidavits pinged each other like hammers on a bad bell. I think this, we closed the door. We didn't measure the threshold. And thresholds are where the world cheats, where inside and outside sign temporary treaties, and visibility becomes a negotiable instrument. That night, I dreamed the day again, like I'd been there. The folding table with a cut in the vinyl that looked like a map of Kansas, the smell of hot dogs learning to apologize, a girl with knees smudged by summer standing at the exact place where an adult's shadow would be most useful. Adults invent weather for children. Breezes that aren't there, shade that disobeys geometry. We do it with our bodies and with our attention. The tape shows a tower of attention built at 2 hours 13 minutes and 47 seconds and toppled at 2 hours 13 minutes and 49 seconds. What was behind it? I woke with the answer, like a taste I couldn't name, metallic, thin, not blood, not coin, something older. By noon the next day, I found the only person in Hawthorn who still owned an oscilloscope and thought that was a reasonable way to spend a Saturday. Her name was Priya Singh, retired from a defense contractor, moved here for the quiet, brought a garage full of devices for measuring the manners of light. "You want to chase a shimmer?" she said, adjusting her glasses with a finger that had solder scars. "We can chase a shimmer." We set sensors around the oak in the table and one on the fence where the sparrow had declined to participate. Priya ran a baseline, then a sweep. "You're expecting EAM spikes," she said. "We might see some, but that's TV thinking. I'm more interested in phase shift. Like audio? Like time telling itself a joke and then explaining the punchline. Phase shift is politeness," she said. Two waves pass through the same space and try not to be rude. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 40 seconds, a breeze caught the foil and waved at the day. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 47 seconds, a father laughed and turned into a wall. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 48 seconds, the scope whispered a little secret. "There," Priya said, tapping the screen. Not power, phase. Something layered itself over itself for a breath. "Like two scenes?" "Like the same scene taking a second try," she said. "Could a human do that?" "A human can make a street believe a lot of things," she said. "Mirrors, angles, heat, but this feels like a place trying to be gracious to a bad idea." "You think the van and the man used that grace," I said, hating my sentence as I said it. "I think humans exploit manners," she said. "Even the world's." We watched the tape again at her workbench, the sparrow refusing celebrity, the red coin of the cup still on the grass. When the flare came, Priya slowed it one more click. "See the edge?" she asked. "Not the bright." "The edge of the bright. It's too clean." The day tidied up so we wouldn't notice ourselves losing track. "How do you solve a thing that polite?" I asked. "You stopped being polite back," she said, grinning like a pirate, and killed the garage lights. The oscilloscope glowed sea green. The hum stood up straighter. And the place, at last, decided it was time to tell us something it had been saving for people who could bear the cost of knowing. Priya's garage had the temperament of a submarine. Cool, purposeful, full of dials that took your pulse just by being looked at. She dimmed the overheads until only the oscilloscope's soft tide lit our hands. "Places like this don't speak English," she said. "They speak in overlaps. Pay attention to the edges, not the brightness." "What am I looking for?" I asked. "The mistake," she said. "Nature is a competent clerk. When a receipt doesn't add up, she leaves a smudge." We set the sensors again, tighter around the oak and the folding table's ghost. I placed the red cup on the grass where the foil flare had started. Mary Ellen joined us, a cardigan over determination, her camcorder in a box like a retired soldier brought out to advise the young. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 40 seconds, the cicadas clocked in. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 47 seconds, the father's laughter turned into a wall. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 48 seconds, the green wave on Priya's scope lagged itself by a hair. "Phase slip," she said. A hello from a second that didn't consent to be first. I stepped forward into the shade that didn't follow rules. The temperature dipped, not cold, just subtractive, as if the air removed what it didn't need to carry me. The hum tightened into a note that didn't quite fit Western scales. "What does it want?" I asked, and immediately felt foolish for assigning motives to weather. It wants to finish, Priya said. All interference wants to resolve. The universe hates the feeling of talking over itself. Mary Ellen touched my elbow. Do you smell pennies? I did, not blood cleaner. The taste of old copper pipes when a house first wakes up. Overshare time. When I was 7, my dad and I replaced a length of pipe under the sink, and I learned 2 things. The smell of water that's been waiting, and the way adults beat rust by insisting. The yard smelled like that waiting and insistence. Emma's mother said the same, Mary Ellen whispered. The day tasted metallic. The state's version goes like this. A predator targeted a family gathering, exploited noise and distraction, moved fast, left slower. Fibers, hairs, a badge of mistakes that took decades to cash. Solved. I don't argue with justice when it finally makes space for itself at the table. But I've seen predators who think they're magicians, and I've seen magicians who don't know they're borrowing from something older. Most don't curate the light. This one did, or the street did it for him to keep its manners intact while a crime took place in its parlor. Let's be rude, Priya said, and smiled like trouble. She lifted the red cup and planted it in the exact path where Emma's bright had moved. We'll trigger the phase slip and then trip it. How? Mirrors, she said, and produced 2 rectangles from a canvas bag. If the day wants to tidy an edge, we'll give it more corners to clean. We positioned the mirrors to make a lazy V toward the oak, angled to catch the sun's scratch and toss it back not to us, but to the shade. Priya watched the scope. I watched the grass. Mary Ellen watched the place where children watch when parents think they're being watched. The hum leaned in like a polite eavesdropper. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 47 seconds on our simulated loop, the wave split into 2 polite liars. There, Priya said softly. The moment splits. The day creates a corridor to deliver brightness where it's missing. If you step just so. She nudged my wrist toward the shade. My fingers sank into cool the way they do when reaching into a stream. The world didn't resist. It accommodated. I know how that sentence sounds. I also know the crosswinds of grief and science can make an honest man melodramatic. So here's the simpler version. For a heartbeat, the yard was 2 yards, one layered over the other by the courtesy of light. A very small person, following the line that adults' attention drew like scaffolding, could slip into the kind yard a half step behind the noisy one long enough to step past a set of eyes. And someone waiting where those layers agreed could coax that step the way a street musician coaxes a coin from a trouser pocket. Could this be repeated? I asked. Priya nodded once. On purpose, with practice, at that hour, on that day's sky. You'd need to learn the street's manners. Most criminals don't care to be that patient. Some do. We stood exactly where the frame had pinched in 1979 and tried to be the kind of rude that refuses to let bad magic use good physics. The hum rose, then thinned like a smile someone thought better of. The cup's red light coin flickered, brightened, then snapped gone. The scope settled. The corridor closed its throat and became mere shade again. Is it over? Mary Ellen asked. For now, Priya said. Edges get tired too. I looked around for the human parts, the overlooked details that make headlines unnecessary. The cooler had been replaced 3 times by then, but the concrete oval it sat on remained, stained with rings of summers. The fence had a section where boards were newer, not because of rot, but because of regret. The across-the-river man had leaned a ladder there. Later, neighbors replaced planks like teeth. Still later, they replaced memory with new gardens. Time does landscaping. I knocked on doors that afternoon, not to accuse, but to borrow. Tell me the part you still tell yourself, I said at each one. Some parts repeated the van, the call, the years without, the sudden with. But some parts were only for private use. A woman who took down wind chimes because they harmonized with the hum. A man who stopped grilling in June because foil turned traitor in his hands. A teacher who quit teaching 3-year-olds because attendance sheets looked like wanted posters. We build new lives with old lumber. Hawthorn's houses creaked with it. Around 6, I went back to my motel with a sack of barbecue and the sense I was being followed by politeness. The sky tried on purple like prom. I ate over the sink because guilt and sauce don't share cutlery. The television played local news that easily could have been national if it had chosen different adjectives. Then, at 9:11 p.m., my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize and a voice that stepped softly over its own name. "You're the reporter," the voice said. "Once," I said. "You're asking about the light." "I am. You're the first one in 42 years who came here for the light and stayed long enough to hear it tell you to leave." A breath. "Don't leave. Not yet." "Who is this?" "The person who learned the trick by accident," she said, "and paid for it on purpose. We met at midnight because that's when people who owe you something but haven't decided how much show up." The woman wore a denim jacket with a ghost of bleach on the sleeve and a grief that had learned to eat at normal speed. She introduced herself as Carrie Jensen. "I was 11, she said. "I was the Sparrow Girl." "The what?" "The kid filming the Sparrow," she said, and I saw her face in the older face, a line of concentration that didn't trust the world with its peripheral vision. "Everyone thinks the Sparrow was an accident." "It wasn't. I was trying to keep the lens busy so it wouldn't catch what I'd promised not to let it catch." "Who did you promise?" My voice put pillows under the question as it left my mouth. "The man with the gray van," she said. "He lived across the river then. He worked at the appliance store. He knew how to talk to mothers and make them feel informed. He knew how to talk to kids and make them feel recruited." "How did he recruit you?" "He asked for a favor," she said. "He said the family wanted film of the picnic, and would I get the Sparrow? And when the father laughed, would I move my feet to get a better angle so the shot didn't go dark?" Her eyes went bright, but didn't spill. "I moved my feet exactly when he told me to. He was teaching me to tidy. I didn't know I was tidying a crime. I let the sentence sit between us like a witness on a good chair." "Why now?" "Because the state solved it," she said, "and the street didn't. And because I have 2 grandkids who run toward light, and I hear the hum in their toddler monitors. And because I think the place wants to forgive me, and doesn't know how if I keep pretending my feet didn't learn somebody else's timing." We went back to the Oak at noon the next day, the hour upside down from 2:14, so the world couldn't accuse us of reenactment. Carrie stood where she had stood as a child and held the old camcorder like a prop used correctly. She showed me the foot positions, the shift at the beat, the way the lens insists on filling a frame when asked nicely. "He said to move until the light cleared," she said. "I asked him how I'd know, and he said, 'The day will let you know.' Did he talk about the hum?" I asked. "He called it a friendly," she said, "like in video games. He said, 'The friendly will tell you when the scene lines up.' I hate him, if you're wondering. I hate him in a way that would get me fired from polite rooms. But hate is a fast carb. It burns hot, then leaves you shaking. Precision lasts." So we were precise. We traced steps, we mapped angles, we asked the scope for help. And when the day flared a small apology, we had a plan for what to do with it. "Nature is a competent clerk," Priya had said. Fine, we'd file a counter receipt. We'd ask the place to show us the path politely stolen and show it back in a way a child could refuse next time. We'd build a noise of our own and teach the light some manners. If that sounds grand, forgive me. Middle age makes poets of the practical because we finally admit we're scared. I don't want more children learning other people's timing. I want a street to remember to be rude when required. The plan needed a tone, a mirror, and the kind of stubborn that ruins friendships. We had all 3. We also had a deadline, Sunday, the neighborhood's summer potluck. They still held it, because ceremony stays even when sense leaves. "We'll aim for 2:14, Priya said. But this time, the corridor opens to a wall. What wall? Us, I said. And a sign the light can read. Sunday came with that church bell, certainty small towns wear like a good hat. Hawthorn set out its tables again, pasta salads rehearsing their alibis, beveled eggs remembering which side of history they're on. I walked the block early with coffee, and the kind of nerves you get before telling a story you hope lands softer than the truth that made it necessary. Priya rolled up with a duffel of polite mischief. Collapsible mirrors, a matte black fabric that eats glare for breakfast, and 2 battery packs that could light a porch or a moral lesson. We're not doing a séance, she said, grinning. We're doing boundary training. Sit, I told the day under my breath. Stay. Carrie arrived last, denim jacket, quiet resolve, eyes finding the exact square where an 11-year-old once stood and learned the world tailors itself to the confident. She touched the grass the way you touch a photograph when you think no one's watching. Let's build the wall, she said. The plan was simple in the way seatbelts are simple only after a century of wrecks. Take the corridor the light politely offers and make it visible, then make it inconvenient. Priya anchored the matte fabric to 2 garden stakes between the oak shade and the folding table scar. We placed the mirrors for a controlled flare, not into the shade, but back onto the fabric, so the corridor would paint its own outline when it tried to tidy an edge. Finally, we hung a small sign at 3 feet off the ground, white letters on navy. Not this way. Will the day read English? I asked. It will read contrast, Priya said. Contrast is the only grammar the sun respects. At 1:45, Mary Ellen brought lemonade and a look that said she'd buried relatives with less ceremony. You're about to make the neighborhood look at what it's been walking around, she said. Good. We'd told folks we were filming a safety PSA about visibility true, as far as it went. The neighbors were game. People like being on the right side of hindsight. We placed the red cup on the grass where the foil had once flexed. The scope hummed its sea-green rumor. The cicadas tuned. The church bell finished whatever argument it was having with the hour. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 40 seconds, a breeze flirted with the fabric, and the fabric refused to be charmed. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 47 seconds, someone's father laughed, and in that laugh, the past folded like it always had. Then the corridor arrived, polite as ever. You don't see it full on. You see its edges as they correct the picture your brain thinks it deserves. A brightness that's a patch job. A shadow that's been combed. The mirrors caught the correction and threw it onto the fabric, which drank it and said, enough. The white letters, not this way, popped like a rule a child can keep. And the hum, that signature of well-mannered interference, broke into 2 notes, unsure which room it had been invited to. Now, Priya whispered. Carrie stepped into her old mark and didn't move her feet. That was the whole trick this time. Disobedience in service of attention. She kept the lens steady, no tiding. Adults, trained by a lifetime of smoothing over, shifted awkwardly, then stopped when they saw the sign. Children, who rid the world faster, laughed and obeyed without resenting the instruction. The corridor bumped against a wall it didn't expect and behaved like every polite thing denied a graceful exit. It apologized and left. The scope flattened. The hum went back to being cicadas. The mirror's flare turned ordinary, and the street felt less drafty. If you want fireworks, I can't help you. What we made was a good door that declines to open at the wrong time. Nothing else happened, which was the point. But the absence had weight. People stood there, staring at not this way, and you could see the history that had been borrowing their posture return it, one vertebra at a time. A boy of about 8 tugged his mother's sleeve. Is this for Emma? He asked, and the mother, who had not planned to tell him that name for another 5 years, said, yes, and for you. After the folding tables were stripped, and the bowls went back to cupboards that prefer soup to fossils, we stayed. Priya packed in the kind of satisfied silence engineers get when a bridge does exactly what the math promised. Mary Ellen hugged Carrie, the way women who remember the same storm hold on long enough to check if the other one still hears the thunder. I took the sign down and ran my thumb over the letters, as if the paint had secrets I hadn't paid for. You think it'll stick? I asked Priya. Physics will keep its appointments, she said. Habit will need reminders. She handed me the sign. Hang it in your motel tonight. Let the room learn. That evening, my phone lit up again with a number that hadn't yet decided whether it trusted me. A man's voice, this time gray at the edges. You're the one making trouble with fabric. Boundary training, I said. They said the case was solved, he said, a sentence with 1,000 resentments rent-controlled inside it. It was, I said. The house still charges rent. I was a rookie back then, he said. Hawthorn PD. They put me on cones and coffee. I saw something I didn't put in the report. What? A reflection in a kitchen window across the street, he said. Not the van, not the man, the flare. Like the window had a sun of its own for a blink. I told my sergeant, and he said, leave the sky to God and the shoes to us. The shoes led across the river. God kept the sky. Why call now? Because my granddaughter watched her sign today and said, not this way, to a dog that was about to bolt, he said, laughing at himself. I want her to live in a town that knows how to say that to bigger things. He gave me 2 names, one I recognized, one I didn't. The second belonged to a woman who had sold blinds and mirrors for a truck in 1979. We called her the Shade Lady, he said. She knew everybody's windows. If the day needed help tidying, she could have supplied the tools. The Shade Lady lived 40 minutes downriver in a double-wide that had retired with dignity. She made me iced tea the color of twice-told stories and looked at me with a face built to survive being misread. I sold light back to people, she said. That was the business. If you called me to keep the afternoon off your couch, I came with options. Did you work Hawthorn Drive that summer? I asked. She smiled without the part where the eyes follow. Everybody worked Hawthorn. Yard of the month, block of the year. They wanted their rooms to feel like magazine pages. Did a man ever ask you about cleaning edges with foil? I watched the word travel from my mouth to her memory and set off a car alarm. Not with foil, she said slowly. With safety film. Said he was doing a school demo about sun damage. Asked how to make a hallway brighter at noon with mirrors without blinding anybody. I told him, you can fold a street if you get the angles wrong. He said, exactly. Do you remember his name? She shook her head, then nodded at something else. I remember the smell, she said. Old pennies. Like a house that cleared its throat. I left with a photocopy of an invoice book. Dates, addresses, scribbles that meant more when gasoline was 59 cents. One address was Hawthorn, 3 doors down from Mary Ellen's. The Shade Lady had installed a convenience, a mirror panel, in a dark hallway to bounce afternoon light. It had a note in the margin. Temporary remove after picnic. I've written sentences that made men angry and women careful. This one made me sit on the curb and look at my shoes. The street had offered its kindness like a dish at a potluck, and someone had salted it wrong on purpose. The removal note was the worst kind of tidy evidence of premeditation disguised as cleanup. I took the invoice to Priya. She held it like a relic and then like a wire. He built a corridor inside the house and then coaxed the street to line up, she said. He didn't need the light to be perfect. He just needed us to be helpful. Can we unbuild it? I asked. We can make the house rude to that trick, she said. Permanent mat in the hall. Anti-reflective film on the window. And we teach the people who live there to love a little darkness at 2 in the afternoon. We knocked on that door, and a young couple answered, new to Hawthorn, exhausted by a toddler, tired of apologizing for furniture that doesn't match yet. We told them the history their drywall had inherited. They cried in the polite way of people who haven't had time for impolite grief. Then they let us put ugly film on their pretty window because love is practical like that. That night, I hung the "Not This Way" sign in my motel room. The AC unit rattled like an old man trying to remember a joke. The sign looked ridiculous and exactly right. I slept. Around 2, I woke to the hum, thin, polite, persistent. It moved from the window to the door, tested the lock, explored the corner where cheap art tried to repeat a sunset. I sat up, heart doing drumline, and watched the sign. It didn't glow. It didn't pulse. It just existed. The hum faded. The room picked up its own breath again, and I laughed once, ungenerous and relieved. In the morning, the motel clerk 19, bored, curious, asked if I was the guy with the sign. "My aunt says you're teaching the neighborhood to be mean," he said, shy grin. "Just at 2:14, I said. "The rest of the time we can be saints." The week after, Hawthorn changed in ways no press release could make interesting. Folks put up little polite walls at knee height, not fences, not barriers, just signals, plants, benches, a stripe of shade cloth where a corridor liked to form. The shade lady's address book made its rounds. Mirrors got moved. Windows got a little less helpful. Kids learned to say, "Not this way," to each other when a game of tag reached the oak and adults' attention started to build scaffolding. The hum came less often. When it did, it ended with a shrug. And then, because the world likes a callback when the audience gets comfortable, somebody mailed Mary Ellen a VHS tape in an envelope with no return address. Black plastic, scuffed, labeled in a tidy hand. Picnic full. We had seen the digitized copy a dozen times. This wasn't that. We borrowed a VCR from a closet where Hawthorn stored its obsolete technologies like old testimonies. The machine groaned, made its peace, and the screen filled with a day that had learned to confess. There were extra seconds before and after the famous flare. The camera wobbled, not at the sparrow, but at a mirror in a hallway. A child's reflection, small and brave, walked past. And for one frame, you could see the corridor the day had borrowed light to make. It wasn't supernatural. It was municipal. It was the town agreeing, out of kindness, to be a better host to its own brightness and being used. We watched in a room that didn't breathe until the tape clicked to its end. Mary Ellen put her hands flat on her knees and said, "Well, now we all know how to be impolite." The full tape did what truth loves best. It didn't shout. It corroborated. 30 extra seconds framed the day like a witness who finally decides to stick around after giving a statement. The mirror in the hallway temporary. The shade lady's note promised caught the flare at a new angle. Then the lens swung wide to the yard, where everyone's attention gathered like scaffolding, and a corridor of courtesy drew itself between shadow and shine. We didn't post the tape. Hawthorn is allergic to spectacle. It breaks out in regret. Instead, we did what small towns do, something tender is at stake. We made a pot of coffee and created a rule. The PTA printed a flyer nobody would argue with. At 2 o'clock to 3 p.m., be louder with your edges. It translated in practice to fewer reflective surfaces on hot days, to adults standing in shadow rather than making new shade with their bodies, to the humble magic of saying, "Not this way," in a voice children could accept without feeling scolded. Carrie filmed a 2-minute piece with Mary Ellen for the library's history shelf. No names, no villains, just 2 women explaining how a day can be too generous and how neighbors can teach it to save some of that generosity for later. I wrote a column the kind no editor would buy about the politeness tax, the subtle price places pay for being too eager to help us see, and how certain men learn to spend it. "Do you ever worry," Priya asked me, "that we're making a myth more efficient?" "I worry about everything. I said. But I prefer my myths with wiring diagrams. We installed ugly matte film in 3 more houses, and the owners sent us pies because gratitude in Hawthorn likes to be eaten. The shade lady came by with a trunk of returns mirrors that had outlived their alibi. You ever think about how many crimes depended on good housekeeping? She asked. Every day, I said. I write better when my desk is a mess. She winked. Leave the sky to God, the shoes to you, and the dust to me. With the practical anchored, the other part caught up the one that sits with you at night and asks whether a solved case is a rested case. I started walking at 2 a.m., a habit I stole from grief and kept for its cardio. Hawthorn has a different soundtrack than sprinklers negotiating with timers, a cat congress discussing zoning. At the corner by the oak, the air would do its familiar subtractive trick, then decide against it, then settle. I started saying hello to the subtraction when it came. It's impolite not to. One of those nights, the rookie cop, now retired, now friend, fell into step beside me. I read your column, he said. Sorry, I said. Don't be. You called it a tax. I've been calling it a tithe. The town gave 1/10 of its trust that day, and it took 4 decades and a sign to get it back. We stood at the fence line where the ladder had leaned once and never again. You know what else happened the week after? He asked. Tell me. The pharmacy put a bell on the door and called it security, he said, laughing at the memory. But the bell made mothers more visible when they entered. Predators don't like rooms paying attention. They like rooms tiding. We were quiet the way 2 men are when silence lets them be smarter than talk. A sprinkler head clicked. A porch light exhaled. Then he added, You're leaving soon. You can always tell when a man's suitcase starts packing the sentences in his mouth, I said. 1 more week. I want to write this down in a way that helps the next town without making this one famous for something it didn't ask to be. He nodded. Make us ordinary, he said. Ordinary and a little ruder. The farewell week filled with small acts that would look like nothing on TV and like everything to people who live here. A bench installed at 3 feet under the oak for shade without scaffolding. The PTA flyer turned into a magnet on fridges that can bear both report cards and rules. A summer camp counselor inventing corridor tag, where the goal is to block imaginary shortcuts with real friendship. A Sunday sermon that simply said, God made the sun. You don't have to help. Carrie and I recorded the last of her confession on my antique tape deck. She told the microphone about feet and timing and guilt's long commute. She made a small joke. This is the first time I've been rude on purpose, and the laugh in her mouth didn't wobble anymore. When we finished, she asked me to erase the part where she said the man's name. The courts did that part, she said. The street and I did this part. On my last afternoon, a storm assembled itself on the county line, decided we weren't worth the trouble, and wandered off. The place smelled like metal anyway, the way it does when weather drafts a letter and doesn't send it. I stood by the oak 1 more time. The hum grazed my jaw and then went looking for someone else to bother. Not this way, I said aloud, smiling at a tree. You want a climax, so here's the one the world gave us, small and sufficient. A toddler 4 maybe broke from his grandmother's hand at the sound of a popsicle truck. He ran along the edge of the corridor that wasn't there anymore. The sign was not hanging, the mirrors packed, the fabric folded. But Hawthorn had learned its line. 3 adults who didn't know each other stepped out of their shade and into the habit of being a wall. Not this way, they said together, then laughed because they'd heard their own unison. The kid redirected. The grandmother mouthed thank you. The truck failed to play the last note of its song, and the street, God bless it, was just a street again. That night, Mary Ellen hosted one last small thing. Lemonade, cookies, 2 lawn chairs that had been repainted more times than anyone admits. She asked me to bring the sign. We sat, knees proud of the work they'd done, and watched the corner do nothing spectacular. I thought I wanted the city to put a plaque up, she said. Now I want the rules to live only in hands and habits, and whatever that was you all did with the fabric. Boundary training, I said. She nodded. Boundaries, she said, tasting the word like medicine she'd finally learned to take before the cough. We have them now, Daniel. I left before dawn because departures are a courtesy too. I put the "not this way" sign on the passenger seat like a partner who didn't mind my driving. At the edge of town, I looked in the rear view, and the world did not perform for me. No shimmer. No apology. Just a road unwinding its old argument with distance. 2 exits past the county line, my phone pinned with a video from Priya. It was 2 seconds long, taken at 2:14 the day after I left. The matte fabric wasn't up. The mirrors were wherever mirrors go to think about their crimes. The scope was at home, humming to itself. The shot was of the grass by the folding table scar. The caption said only, "Listen." I played it. Cicadas, a lawnmower sulking 3 streets away. And under it, for a beat, the hum, polite as ever, and then another sound, new and honest. A chorus of children, somewhere out of frame, practicing "not this way." Then the hum stopped, as if manners had finally learned to defer to a better rule. The road home did what roads do it, pretended to be straight, while quietly solving 1,000 small geometry problems for me. I took the sign into my apartment like a stray dog and leaned it where company would have to ask. Not this way watched me do dishes, fold shirts, and pretend I prefer decaf afternoon. By Tuesday, I was behaving better just to impress it. You'd think distance would dilute Hawthorn. Instead, it steeped. Emails arrived like thank you notes from muscles that had learned a new movement. APTA lesson plan titled Edges Behaving Loudly. A photo of the Shade Lady's invoice book in a glass frame at the library next to a note that said, "A town keeps its receipts." A short voicemail from the rookie-turned-grandfather, just breathing, then, "We're okay." Then Carrie called. "I think my house is practicing," she said, half laughing. "The afternoon isn't so eager to help anymore." "Practicing what?" "Being a little rude," she said. I made iced tea, and it tasted like a boundary. Friday, my landlord's idea of a fire alarm test tried to assassinate a casserole, so I took a walk. A street over, a group of kids played a game I didn't recognize. They draped a length of cheap cloth between 2 trees at knee height. One child, eyes closed, counted to 20, while the others tried to run a route without brushing the cloth. "If you touch it, you owe the sidewalk a compliment," a girl declared, "because you asked it to work too hard." I laughed out loud and kept moving. Hawthorn had exported a rule without needing a memo. I called Priya to brag on the world. She answered mid-wrench, music in the background that sounded like a programmer teaching a piano how to argue. "Glad you called," she said. "We're building a kit." "A kit?" "Boundary training in a box," she said. "For blocks like Hawthorn. Mat, mirrors, instructions written for people who roll their eyes." Carrie wrote the parent copy. Mary Ellen refuses to narrate, so obviously she's narrating. "Where do I send money?" "Send pie," she said. And a paragraph that explains why this isn't magic. Here's the thing with paragraphs like that. They either bore people or become tattoos. I tried for tattoo. "It's not magic," I wrote. "It's manners. The world tends to us with light. We owe it the courtesy of not letting thieves schedule their crimes for when the day is at its sweetest. Teach your street to save a little generosity for later." Saturday morning. I went to get my hair cut by a man who thinks history is best delivered with a straight razor. "You still chasing ghosts?" he asked. "Teaching them to cue," I said. He nodded like I'd said something admirable about fishing. "Cueing," he said. "I like that." The text came from Mary Ellen at 2:08 the next day. "Got company?" I grabbed my keys and the sign. Some invitations don't require an address. They'd gathered under the oak, of course. Priya in a sun hat that pretended not to be scientific. The shade lady in a shirt that said, nitrogen monoxide, thank you. Carrie with grandchildren, who did not share her suspicion of sparrows. The rookie with a cooler, as if beverages were the uniform of the repentant. A new couple I didn't recognize, beautiful with the exhaustion of first parenthood. And 3 teenagers who had agreed, at great personal cost, to demonstrate the kit for the neighborhood watch. We set the mat cloth, planted the stakes, placed the mirrors. The teenagers rolled their eyes so hard I heard cartilage. The scope, Priya's travel model, hummed like a cricket with a degree. The new mother held her baby the way sky holds roofs in summer, carefully, expansively, with the secret awareness that everyone believes the arrangement is permanent. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 45 seconds, a breeze wandered through. The brand new father, trained by centuries of men who believe their shoulders are furniture, moved to make shade. His wife put a hand on his arm and whispered, "Let the tree do its job." He nodded, a man surprised by the pleasure of being unnecessary. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 47 seconds, the laugh. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 48 seconds, the hum did its old trick, and the coroner tried to put on its courteous coat. The mirrors caught the edge, flung it to the cloth, and the words, "not this way," showed up even though the sign wasn't there, because muscle memory is a city ordinance if you do it right. A toddler pointed at nothing in particular and shouted, "Nope." Everyone applauded nothing in particular, which is to say, themselves. After, we ate fruit that remembered its orchards and cookies that forgave our mouths. The shade lady told a story about a lighthouse she'd visited that had a floor built to punish inattention. Children loved it. Adults cussed. Mary Ellen asked the teenagers if the kit was cool, and their leader, bless her brave, diplomatic soul, said, "It's not uncool." We wrote that on the instruction sheet. "Stay a couple days," Carrie said to me later, when the block sat satisfied like a well-fed congregation. "Write in the library and pretend you're from here." "I am from here," I said. From anywhere, a street refuses to outsource its kindness. That night, I slept in the same motel because comedy is a sacrament. The sign watched over the chair where my jacket auditioned for the part of habit. The AC purred like a cat that had a good lawyer. I dreamed of a map with bright threads running through it, towns saying no at a polite time of day, edges behaving loudly, light relieved to have fewer chores. When I woke, I could still feel the ribbon of refusal humming under the country. You want a turn, don't you? A twist, a reveal, the shock. The solved case gave us the culprit. The street gave us the method. There was one thing left, and it came from the person I had least expected, Emma's brother. Ethan, a man in his mid-40s, with the voice of someone who has been entrusted with other people's stories for a living. He'd been away through most of this, because some distances are how you make it to the next day. He asked to meet me at the house with the hallway mirror note. "I read your column," he said, and then surprised us both by laughing. "Tattoo worthy. Don't let it go to your head." "I've been failing at humility a long time," I said. "I'll keep practicing." He ran his hand along the new matte film on the window, then the wall where the temporary mirror had once lived. "The state gave us a name," he said. "That helped. You all gave us a sentence. Not this way. That helps more. We just moved mirrors," I said. "You re-taught the street we grew up on," he said. "And you taught me something I didn't know I needed to know." "What's that?" "That a place can forgive you without asking you to forget," he said. For 40 years, I thought coming back was a betrayal of my coping. Turns out staying away was a betrayal of the block. We stood with that, letting it pay its rent to the air. He added, almost embarrassed, "I don't remember Emma as well as everyone wants me to. I was 5. But I remember the day the way the light tried to be helpful, and we let it." I think about my kids and how many helpful things I let happen to them. Screens, strollers that make sidewalks optional, push notifications that outsource my attention. I'm going to be ruder. We walked Hawthorn like men on a slow apology tour. The pharmacy bell still cheeped like a bird assigned to be a clerk. The park had installed a low rope along a path as a politeness reminder. A dad taught a daughter how to squint at 3 in the afternoon and say, "No thank you, light," like she was refusing seconds at dinner. We reached the oak, and Ethan put his palm on the bark. "You kept us," he said to a tree, and did not appear foolish for it. Before I left again, we held a small thing. Not a memorial, not a ceremony, a practice. At 2:14, we stood at our marks and did nothing spectacular. We didn't tidy. Later, a child drew chalk arrows on the sidewalk that led away from the old corridor and toward the library. Hawthorn, without conferring, decided to leave them there all week. The arrows got rained on, stepped on, and redrawn by somebody else's hand. That's how rules look when they mean it. I drove out at dawn. The sign rode shotgun. At the county line, I pulled over, not because the view asked for it, but because my chest did. I took the sign out and set it on the grass facing the road and laughed because no one needed it here, and because I am a man who loves overkill. A pickup slowed. The driver raised 2 fingers in that American rural benediction that means, "We see you." I raised mine back. 2 days later, Priya sent a photo from a town 2 states over. A different oak, a different fabric, the same words. The caption, "They taught their street to save some kindness for later." You can tell when a town has crossed a river it used to mistake for a mirror. The reflections change first shop windows, show more sky than self. Car hoods stop auditioning for Sunset's stand-in. Hawthorn looked ordinary in the way healed skin does. New, strong, a little shiny where it learned. I sat up at the library's far table with my back to a shelf of county maps and started writing the version of events that didn't need a villain to hold it together. Mary Ellen passed by on her way to a genealogy program and rapped her knuckles on my desk like a judge who loves you. "Don't make us saints," she said. "Make us useful. Useful travels," I said. "Saints do too," she said, "but they're accused of it." She winked. "I prefer plausible." The kit lived on a cart near the reference desk now. Fabric, mirrors, stakes, a laminated card that said, "Borrow me before your block party." A boy about 10 rolled it away with a solemnity usually reserved for ceremonial flags. "Science," he told me without looking up. "We're going to be rude and safe." At lunch, Priya and I walked to a diner that pretends its menu hasn't changed since your uncle's first divorce. She slid into the booth like an engineer boarding a capsule. "Kits shipped to 5 towns," she said. 2 asked if we had a version for 8 a.m. schools. "Edges behave different in the morning," I said. "They do," she said. "But the grammar holds." The waitress topped my coffee until it nearly achieved consciousness. "You all doing the mirror thing?" she asked. "My cousin in Riverbend says their park is quieter at 2 now. She says the sky minds its business." I could live on that sentence for a month. That afternoon, I visited the house with the hallway that used to apologize too much. The young couple had framed the shade ladies' temporary remove after picnic note and hung it near the new mat wall. "We tell people it's modern art," the husband said, which it is. The medium is regret. Their toddler, Emerson, made a run for a strip of sunlight and then, to our delight, stopped herself at the threshold and clapped like her own chaperone. "No thith way," she announced, inventing a dialect. Her mother lifted her like a world that had finally hired better help. "We didn't teach her that," she whispered. The house did. Evenings, I read old newspapers on microfilm until the library lights performed their closing time ballet. I like the sound of spooling. It's the audible version of patience. In a 1979 column about the picnic, pre-vanishing, a line from a pastor caught me. A community is a set of practiced promises. In 2025, that line had a new address: shade, mirrors, knees, kids, adults stubbornly refusing to tidy a crime. On Wednesday, Ethan asked me to come by his parents' still house. His mother had moved last year. The rooms kept the shape of her leaving. I brought something out of storage, he said, setting a box on the dining table like a relative who'd knocked at the door and remembered not to enter without being welcomed. Inside, Emma's blocks, a tiny sweater his grandmother had started and never finished, a cracked Viewmaster, and a Polaroid of the picnic with edges that had browned into elegy. Does this help? I asked, the worst question, and still the only one sometimes. It helps the day, he said. It helps the parts of me that think memory is faith. The other parts have to keep earning it. We walked to the oak with the Polaroid between us, as if the paper could use the air. He held it up to the tree. Look, he said softly, as if to both of us, you got taller. The tree, to its credit, remained a tree. I'm going to ask you for a favor, he added, after we'd stopped being sentimental enough to attract lightning. We're forming a little group, 5 of us, who get phone calls when a block in the county wants help. We'll show up, hold the cloth, take the heat if someone thinks we're being hysterical. We need a name that doesn't embarrass us. Committee for Impolite Afternoons, I said. He grinned. Close, he said. We're going with neighbors who stand in the way. Honest, I said. And printable. Thursday brought rain the good kind, that arrives on feet, stays for coffee, and waters the arguments out of people. The matte films beaded with it, proof they were doing work. The corridor didn't even try. Light has the sense to go read a book when it's raining. I wrote and rewrote and deleted the paragraph where I tried to be wise. Wisdom reads better when it looks like a bench. Friday night, the library hosted a film showing no tape, no sparrow. Just a 1950s short called How Not to Disappear at Parties. A narrator with a voice like bowling shoes advised children to stay where adults can count them. It was charming and useless. After, the librarian handed out our flyer instead. Old films were polite, she said. We're practicing a different tone. Saturday morning, I helped the shade lady unload a trunk of found objects for the museum corner. A sliver of mirror that still wanted to be forgiven. A long-dead product brochure that said, Bring noon into your home. In the font of Manifest Destiny, a roll of window film that turned every face into a witness protection plan. Artifacts of assumptions, she said. Put a tiny label under that. In the afternoon, I took a drive, the kind without a plan that turns into an alibi. 20 miles out, a billboard announced a festival I didn't care about in a font that cared too much. I pulled into a turnout and watched a field remember how to be gold. The hum came out here, too light offering to correct a mistake no one had made. Old me would have tightened, waited for the trick, scanned the edges for a door that wasn't real. New me said, out loud, to nobody, We're good. Thank you. The hum folded its napkin, stood, and excused itself. On the way back, my phone buzzed with a message from an editor I used to make money for, and apologies to. Heard you're writing about the Emma case, she texted. If you make it about the light, I can't sell it. If you make it about the monster, I can sell it twice. I'm making it about the street, I typed. It pays better. Not in dollars, she sent back. Those spend fast, I wrote. This spends slow, she called anyway, because she's good at her job. People like heroes and evil, she said. They don't like committees. Wait until you try living without one, I said. We made a town that's slightly worse at disappearing children. That's the headline, she sighed, which meant she was smiling. Send it, she said. I'll hide your vegetables under a sexy title. I sent it. She published it as The Street That Said No. The comments section, a place where Hope goes to practice ducking, was was kind for once. Older readers wrote about shade trees and counting rules. Younger ones wrote about boundaries, like they were discovering fire safety. One person wrote, "I live 3 blocks from there. We're louder at the edges now." I printed that out and put it in my wallet like identification. Sunday again. Hawthorn set out tables like punctuation marks. We didn't install the fabric. We didn't need mirrors. We did place the sign on the grass, not as a device, but like a photograph of an old friend. Kids drew new arrows in chalk. Adults read their own posture like a text. The corridor, if it exists at all anymore, is a shy thing that chooses better houses. At 2:14, the town did nothing spectacular with more skill than some countries. Priya's travel scope habit is hard to retire stayed flat as Kansas. The hum tried on a single note and then trailed off like a conversation that remembered better manners. Mary Ellen raised her paper cup. "To rudeness," she said. "To rudeness," we said back like a blessing. That night, lightning finally decided to buy the ticket it had been refusing. Thunder walked its slow dog over the rooftops. In my motel room, the sign glowed only because my phone did. I recorded the weather on my old tape deck because old machines like to feel necessary. The tape caught something else too. My laugh, quiet and surprised, the kind a man makes when ordinary becomes his favorite plot twist. You've been patient. 2 parts left. Here's where the arc wants to go. A town codifies a habit, a narrator takes it home, and the unexplainable keeps its dignity while losing its leverage. No séances, no triumphal music, just practiced promises, and an afternoon that finally learned how to mind its own business. The morning I meant to leave for good, the town left a note on my windshield in the handwriting of condensation. "Come say goodbye to the ordinary." I drove to the Oak with a travel mug and my worst map-reading face, the one that makes strangers confess directions to me before I ask. Hawthorn had arranged itself with the casual competence of an old choir. No event, no banner, just people doing Sunday the way they'd learned. The neighbors who stand in the way were on their second coffee, pretending they didn't practice in the mirror. The shade lady had brought a bin marked returns, full of shinier temptations coming home to roost. Priya had her scope in a tote, unopened. Mary Ellen wore a hat that made shade ethical. Ethan handed me a folded sheet of paper. "We wrote the rules down, because memory is generous until it rains," he said. The title read, "At 2 in the afternoon, remember your edges." It was a page of small sentences that didn't apologize for being small. Stand in tree shade, not people shade. Don't tidy with your body. Mirrors indoors, pointed at books, not halls. If the light tries to be too helpful, say, "Not this way," to the air, so the room hears you. Count children by names, not colors of shirts. If you forget, forgive yourself fast and try again. "I like the last one," I said. "It's the only one people keep," he said. We tried something new at 1:50. Boredom on purpose. Adults kept talking. Children kept playing. No gathering of attention at one's place. No scaffolding. No big laugh rehearsed by fate. The day, finding us less helpful, shrugged and did its work without us. That was the experiment. It felt like heresy and like good posture. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 47 seconds, a father did laugh, because life has timing even after you submit new sheet music. A dog discovered a sprinkler. A toddler decided she was a bird. The hum made its polite entrance, and then, meeting no corridor to dress, left like a salesman thanked too early. Priya never opened the tote. The scope stayed asleep, a small animal relieved not to be useful. Is that it? A teenager asked, the way teenagers ask a firework if it plans to be a memory or a complaint. That's it, I said. Congratulations on nothing happening. He nodded, filing away the tone for a future where he would pretend not to need it. Cool, he said. And meant it. An older man I hadn't met before ambled over with a cane that had learned his route years ago. "You're the reporter," he said. "Stay long enough, you'll be the guy who carries folding tables." "That's the promotion," I said. He tapped the cane on the ground where once a quarter had taken its bow. "I worked night shift 40 years," he said. "When I came home, I'd sit right there and watch the morning knock itself out, being helpful to people who weren't awake to appreciate it. Then Emma. I moved my chair, sat in the garage. Sometimes I think the day got lonely without me." He looked up through the oak. "Glad it doesn't need me like that anymore." I kept putting the moment off the actual leaving, the handshake that says both "I mean this" and "I hate this." So Hawthorn did it for me. They packed the kid away without lip, said "see you" without speeches, slid a sack of biscuits into my hands, and sent me to the car with a wave that felt like early bedtime. The sign rode shotgun again, agreeable as a dog that knows which towns have better squirrels. On the highway, the world was America about its business. Billboards arguing about breakfast foods, trucks explaining logistics to the horizon, clouds doing their best to be motifs. Somewhere past the county line, the hum climbed in the cab like a thought I'd forgotten to end. It tested the dashboard, sniffed the cup holder, considered the sign. I said, "Not this way," out loud because pretending to be cool is how you miss exits. The hum receded into whatever room hums go to when they've run out of leverage. Back home, I tried to live like a man who hadn't been changed by a street. I failed immediately and well. I stood in my living room at 2 p.m. and moved my chair out of a helpful beam. I called my sister and apologized for declining a barbecue because the light will be doing a trick and I want to be present. I wrote sentences that included the phrase, "privately municipal," which should be illegal. I hung the sign and took it down twice because icons make me itchy and practices make me calm. The first email arrived Tuesday from a woman in a town called Willow Bend. Subject line, "Our afternoon." "We have an oak," she wrote, "and a mother who counts fast, and a neighbor with too many mirrors. May we borrow your idea?" By Friday, Priya had shipped them a box. On Saturday, I got a photo of a fabric rectangle between 2 tomato stakes on a lawn that could have been my childhood's. Under it, chalk. "Not this way." Kid handwriting. A dog print in the R. I started a folder on my desktop. Afternoons? I'm not a scrapbook person, but apparently I am this. Photos came in from Lancaster, from a parish in Louisiana, from a school in Idaho that used a blue bedsheet because the science teacher liked the color better than black. A note from a nursing home. "We're making glare unhelpful for our residents at nap time." A parent group in a big city sent a video that made me cry in public. Children playing tag, and adults stepping into a ray and stepping out again with a theatrical bow. Everyone clapping because adults learning delights children. Midweek, I took a walk downtown and saw something I had no right to. My sign's words in a storefront window, not mine. Exactly. The bakery had stenciled, "Please pay here." Not this way on the glass to guide foot traffic. A joke, sure. And a town using a sentence like a Swiss Army knife. The solved case, remember that? Kept its own pace. Courts finished. Papers filed. A man across the river aged in the manner of men who finally meet every noun they earned. There were statements and lights and a line of cars outside a building that grants closure in Thimbles. People asked if I'd be covering it. I said no. I covered the street. Someone else could do the faces in the courtroom. This is not me being righteous. This is me learning where the work made me useful. That weekend, I drove to my father's grave with a bouquet from a grocery store that tries too hard and a thermos of coffee that doesn't. He'd have liked Hawthorn. He liked rules that made things work and rituals that didn't make you kneel too long. I told him about mirrors and hums, about a street that solved a problem by deciding to be a little rude, about a boy saying nope to a sunbeam. I thanked him for teaching me to listen to pipes and to people. I poured a little coffee on the grass, because men invent sacraments when they don't know where to put their hands. On the way home, I passed a park where I'd once gotten lost in a conversation and misplaced an hour I couldn't afford. Kids ran slantwise through shade. Parents watched but didn't gather. A volunteer in a neon vest rearranged picnic benches like chess pieces. A hand-lettered sign leaned against a tree. Save some kindness for later. I pulled over and took a picture and didn't post it anywhere. Not hoarding, just learning to keep the world for when it can actually use it. Night returned me to my apartment, where the AC remains a poet of limited themes. I sat with the recorder, yes, the analog, because tape survives the tantrums of servers. I spoke the names I could. Emma, Hawthorn, Kriya, Mary Ellen, Shade Lady, Ethan, Carrie, and the collective noun for neighbors. I said the one sentence I want my pocket to always find when the day gets too generous. Not this way. 2 scenes remained, and I knew it. The first would be mine, the second the town's. Mine, because I needed to test whether I had learned anything portable. The town's, because practiced promises deserve a ceremony small enough to keep. So I picked a day with a mean sun and went to the flea market. Flea markets are laboratories for light. They teach you what not to polish. I set up my old tape deck on a vendor's table, $2 for the privilege and a slice of tomato sandwich, and watched the afternoon try to make everyone's atoms more visible. It hummed. It offered. I thanked it. And I stood in the way of a reflective coffee urn so a child could see her father's face instead of being invited into a polite failure. No one clapped. No one had to. The day got easier. I wrote it down and felt ridiculous and right. The town scene came a week later in a text from Ethan. Bench installed. A photo followed. A simple seat under the oak with a plaque the size of a sentence. No name, no date, just, "This place remembers. Please save some kindness for later." A child climbed onto it upside down and read it wrong and laughed and read it right. That's policy. 2 parts left, I told you. This is the last turn before the landing. All that remains is to put the sign where it belongs, and to see if the day, having learned to mind its own business, has any advice for knights. You can spend a life learning the difference between an ending and a landing. Endings pretend to be fireworks. Landings keep your ankles honest. I wanted a landing, something a block could stand on without rehearsing grief every time it needed to cross the street. The sign and I took one more trip to Hawthorn. I didn't announce it. Announcements turn visits into events, and events into performances, and we'd had enough of those. The oak was doing oak things, throwing shade, making wind look employed. A new bench waited under it, plaque modest as a whisper. This place remembers. Please save some kindness for later. A child read it upside down again and declared, "Later is now." I liked her editorial stance. Ethan met me with 2 mugs, and that look men have when they've learned to store joy where it can't leak. "You brought it," he said, nodding at the sign. "I brought it home," I said. "We didn't plant it. We didn't found it. We didn't make it a monument of word that traps sunlight under speeches. We leaned it behind the bench, face inward, like a tool ready for work, and not a relic that demands respect. If it's invisible until needed," Ethan said, "it will be honest." Priya wandered over like a person whose calendar answers to the weather. "I brought the scope," she said, then caught herself and laughed. "I didn't bring the scope. Keep it that way," I said. Mary Ellen arrived with lemon bars that solve as many problems as therapy when the problems are small and the company is willing. The shade lady brought a mirror tile for the museum corner and smashed it with a mallet before anyone could object. "We display it this way," she said, sweeping glitter into a jar. Artifact of an assumption and its undoing. At 2 o'clock, The PTA kids set out a smaller fabric rectangle knee-high across the old corridor's path. They call it the practice line. No ritual, no countdown. Just a habit. Adults step out of people's shade. Children call, nope. When the son tries to do an extra chore, anybody allowed to say, not this way, to the air, like they're letting the room in on the rule. At 2 hours 13 minutes and 47 seconds, a sound that used to make my throat edit, my breathing arrived on time, and then remembered it had nowhere to dress. The corridor, which once recruited light for treachery, found only a mat refusal and neighbors who preferred rude truth to polite danger. The millions of photons trying to be helpful quieted. The day did its appropriate job. The town did the rest. No one applauded. Hawthorns learned that clapping for ordinary insults ordinary. We ate lemon bars. We made room for the shade to do its work. The little girl who had declared, "Later is now," climbed onto the bench and greeted every passerby with a serious please. Somehow, the word did the work of a sentence. That evening, after the tables were stacked and the children had turned chalk arrows into a new county road, Ethan and I carried the sign to the library. The librarian, who has a look for when history shows up without making a reservation, pointed us to a narrow alcove near local maps. "Behind the cart," she said. "Close enough to call, far enough to ignore." We leaned it there, facing inward. The town's rules were on paper now, on fridges and in pockets. The sign was for when memory got rained on and language needed a prop. We took a walk, because men do the talking they're proudest of at a pace the body can forgive. "Do you think Emma would like this version of us?" Ethan asked. "I think she'd like the bench," I said. "And the lemon bars. And the way everyone's ruder at 2. "Ruder," he repeated, smiling. "What a relief." We passed the house that used to apologize with its hallway. A plant now lived where the mirror once tried to fold a street. The toddler, Emerson, stood at the threshold of a bright rectangle and declared, "No fifth way," as if she'd invented law. In a sense, she had. Dusk made a case for itself. The oak edited the last of the heat. Priya joined us on the curb, where plans get approved without minutes. "We've got requests," she said. A soccer league wants to mark their fields with practice lines. A summer camp wants a story hour about edges behaving loudly. And an assisted living home wrote to ask whether the kit works for glare on tile at nap time. "It works anywhere light forgets to mind its business," I said. And anywhere we forget to mind ours. Mary Ellen sat on the bench like a queen who had decided crowns were more trouble than they're worth. "People will move away," she said, almost to herself. "New folks will come. We'll forget a little. Then somebody will see the sign in the alcove, and a child will say nope to a beam, and we'll remember in time." "You want a plaque now?" I teased. She shook her head. "I want baked beans that don't burn," she said. "And people who don't need a miracle to behave like neighbors." Night came in the way good endings do, thoroughly, without audition. The streetlights clocked in. The cicadas traded shifts with crickets. The town didn't feel safer, exactly. It felt more practiced. There's a difference my bones understood before my mouth did. I drove to the motel out of sentimentality and cheapness. The AC sang its one song. I put the recorder on the nightstand and told it we were off duty. It were, anyway. Old machines like to be included. I dreamed a dream so unpoetic it qualified as holiness. Kids getting counted by names. Mirrors pointed at books. Windows with a little bit of stubborn baked in. A street that didn't need to be forgiven because it hadn't tried to be perfect. A day that didn't need our tiding. In the morning, before coffee earned its sainthood, I took one last walk. The bench was there, empty, available. The sign was in the library, unseen, faithful. The oak was on the job. I stood where a corridor had once taken a bow. Nothing happened. I can't give you fireworks. I can give you this. a block that had learned the difference between light that helps and light that is hungry for attention. On the way out, I stopped at the county line pull-off, the one where America practices horizon. I didn't set the sign down this time. I didn't need the theater. I rolled the window down and said to the wide, bright day, "We're good. Thank you." The hum came, polite as a visitor who brought their own napkin, and went about its business. Back home, I hung nothing on the wall and changed everything I do at 2. I teach friends how to be rude in a way that lets children be seen by the right eyes. I send pies to towns that borrow the kit. I answer emails with a paragraph that fits on a fridge magnet. I keep the tape deck because sometimes a room wants to be heard in a way clouds can't edit. And when people ask what happened, what really happened with the case that the state solved and the town outlived, I tell them the only version worth retelling to an audience that knows what it means to get older. A street learned to say no. A day learned to mind its business. A community turned politeness into a tool instead of a trap. And a child we could not bring back taught us how to keep the next one from needing a miracle. If you're listening at home, at 2 in the afternoon, look at your edges. Step out of people's shade. Teach a sentence to your air. Move a mirror. Plant a bench. Draw an arrow in chalk toward the place you want joy to gather. If the light tries to be too helpful, tell it gently, like you would a friend. Not this way. Then go on with your ordinary. It's the bravest ending we get,